Everyone thinks Michael Jackson died in 2009. But what if I told you he didn't? What if I told you that the man the world mourned faked his death to escape something far darker than you can imagine? I didn't believe it either, not at first. But then I saw him, alive. And what he showed me, what he revealed, it's a secret too terrifying to keep, but I have no choice. I have to tell you now.
You think you know the truth, but you're wrong. This is something else entirely. This is the real story of why Michael Jackson had to disappear and why I can't escape the consequences of knowing. But that was just the beginning of a nightmare I couldn't wake up from.
It was late 2018 when it all started. I didn't know at the time, but I was about to step into something far darker than I could have ever imagined. It wasn't a party. It wasn't a random encounter. It was something far more dangerous than anything I'd ever experienced. Michael Jackson's death, everyone thought they knew what happened. Everyone thought it was a tragedy, a final curtain call. But I saw something different. I saw him. And what I learned that night, it still keeps me up at night. I can't even really explain how it all came about. One moment, I was going about my life, and the next, I was in it. You ever feel like you were just meant to be in the wrong place? I did that night. I didn't know then, but what happened would haunt me forever. I remember the first time I saw him, though. Michael. I'm not sure why I thought it would be normal. But when he stood in front of me, alive, not a scratch on him, it was like the world itself stopped moving. I mean, people die, celebrities die, but Michael Jackson? I didn't know how to process it.
It felt wrong, like the air around us had shifted. And the worst part? He looked like he'd never aged, like he was still the same. He looked right through me like he had been waiting for me. Waiting for someone who had the right to know, to understand the truth. I wasn't ready, but I had to be. He told me he'd faked it, his death, his entire life, what the world thought they knew about him. It was all a show, and I didn't believe him. How could I? The king of pop was dead, but the way he said it, so calmly, that was what got to me. It wasn't just a lie. It wasn't a cover-up. It was survival. And that's when I started realizing something. Michael wasn't free. He wasn't at peace. I won't go into every little detail. There are some things you can't unhear, and I don't want to ruin you like that. But there was something about the way he spoke about it that made me sick. He wasn't just hiding from the media or the fame. He wasn't hiding from the people who loved him. He was hiding from them. People who had power over him. People who had power over everything. People who would stop at nothing to see him disappear. I couldn't wrap my head around it. But there was something off. You ever hear a story and just know deep down it's not just some crazy tale? It's real. Too real. I remember walking through the door of his place, somewhere. No one would find him. No one would think to look. But when I passed the hall, I noticed something strange. The hallway seemed darker than it should have been. The walls were covered with old portraits of Michael throughout his life. But the thing that really got to me, it wasn't the pictures themselves. It was their eyes. They were too real. They weren't just pictures. They watched me. I tried to brush it off, but as I walked through the house, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. that someone, something was watching me from the shadows. It wasn't paranoia. It was real. I could feel it. I was being pulled into something I couldn't even begin to understand.
And that's when Michael spoke again, his voice low and serious. They've been watching me for years.
I didn't know who he meant, but I had a feeling I didn't want to know. But I asked anyway. I had to. Who? I said, voice trembling, even though I didn't want to hear the answer. He stared at me for a long moment, like he was debating whether to say it, whether to let me in on the secret. But then his lips parted and he said, people who control everything. People who don't want me alive. People who don't want the world to know the truth. I didn't say anything. What could I say? But deep down, I felt it. The weight of it, the heaviness, the guilt, the fear. This wasn't some conspiracy. This wasn't some random paranoia. This was real.
As I stood there, in the silence of that room, it hit me. He didn't just disappear for himself. He did it to survive. Michael Jackson didn't die that day. He escaped. And now, I was part of this. Part of a truth I wasn't supposed to know. I thought I could leave. I thought I could walk away, forget about it. But no, it was too late. You can't unsee something like that. I can't unhear those words.
And maybe that's why I'm telling you this now. Because I know the truth, and for some reason, I think you need to know it too.
But what happened next? That was when everything changed.
The door creaked as I stepped inside, the sound somehow too loud for such a quiet space. At first it felt normal. It was one of those homes you'd expect to see in a magazine. Polished, well-kept, almost too perfect. The floor gleamed with a soft luster, and the walls, freshly painted in a shade of light gray, reflected the dim light in an almost peaceful way. There were subtle touches of warmth, soft throw pillows, a vase of fresh flowers, a book lying open on a coffee table. Nothing about it screamed out of place. In fact, it should have made me feel at ease, but it didn't. I ran a hand over the smooth surface of the table as I walked through, my fingertips brushing over the cool wood. It didn't feel like a space meant to be lived in. It felt like something you put together to make it look perfect, a place that had been meticulously curated for show. But as I moved deeper into the house, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I glanced around. The air was warm, but it felt thick, like the atmosphere was too dense, too heavy, as though the room was holding its breath, waiting for something.
The faint smell of lavender lingered in the air. The scent, usually so calming, felt forced here, too overwhelming in such a clean, sterile space. It was almost like the house was trying too hard to feel inviting. Every corner, every surface was pristine, but there was no sign of life. No shoes by the door. No jackets tossed over chairs. Not even a speck of dust in the corners. It all felt too calculated. I walked through the living room, noticing how the shadows seemed to fall a little differently than they should. The curtains were drawn, but still, the light filtering through them made the shapes on the floor seem wrong. Too long. Too sharp. It was as if the shadows had been stretched, reaching out in strange ways that didn't match the light at all. I paused for a moment. There was a slight hum coming from somewhere deeper in the house. At first, I thought it was just the refrigerator kicking on.
But when I turned to look into the kitchen, the room was empty. The only sound, the faint ticking of a clock. I could feel my heartbeat start to pick up, the hum still pulsing through the space, though I couldn't quite place where it was coming from. I shifted on my feet, trying to steady myself. There was no real reason for my discomfort. There was nothing here that screamed danger. But it was the absence that unsettled me. It was like the place was designed to feel comfortable, but it wasn't. It felt like a stage, perfectly arranged for some unseen performance. The kind of place that makes you feel watched, even when you're alone. The walls were covered in photographs, family photos, I assumed. But as I walked past them, I couldn't help but notice how lifeless the images looked. Their smiles, their eyes. They didn't seem to belong to real people. It wasn't the kind of photo that captured a moment. It was the kind of picture you hang to make a space feel lived in, to make it feel normal. But it wasn't. I could feel it. Something was wrong here, and I was too far in to turn back now.
I reached a hallway where the floor was slick and silent under my feet. It was too quiet, too perfect. And as I moved deeper into the house, I had this strange, irrational urge to look behind me. Every step seemed amplified in the stillness, the weight of it pressing down on me. I didn't want to admit it, but I could feel my shoulders tense, a prickling sensation crawling up the back of my neck. I stopped in front of a door that led to another room. It was slightly ajar, just enough for me to see a sliver of darkness within. The doorknob was cool under my fingers, but as I touched it, I couldn't help but notice the strange sensation on the back of my neck, the way the air shifted. It felt like something was waiting behind that door, watching me. But I opened it anyway. Inside, the room was small, almost cozy, with dim lighting that cast long shadows across the furniture. A single lamp was on, its warm glow creating soft pools of light that didn't seem to reach into the corners. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding, stepping further in, trying to convince myself it wasn't as strange as it felt. It was just a room, just another part of the house. But there was something about it. The furniture was too perfectly placed. The fabric of the chair too pristine, like no one had ever sat there. The window was closed, but I felt a faint breeze, a breath against my skin. It wasn't real. I was sure of it now. There was no air coming through the window, no fan stirring the atmosphere. It was like the room itself had breathed.
I felt my stomach drop, my hands trembling as I reached for the chair. My fingers brushed the surface, and it was cold. Too cold. It didn't make sense. It was as if the chair had been there, untouched, for years, and yet the rest of the room had been perfectly maintained. I pulled my hand back quickly, the unease bubbling up in my chest. I looked back toward the door, but the hallway seemed farther away now. My heart started to race, and I felt a tightness in my throat, like I was being suffocated by the silence. It wasn't just the space, it was the stillness. No sound, no movement. The house itself felt alive in a way I couldn't explain, its presence wrapping around me, pulling me in. And that's when I heard it. A soft, barely perceptible noise. A scraping, like something being dragged slowly across the floor. It came from somewhere far behind me, just out of sight. I froze, every muscle in my body locking up, my breath shallow. It was impossible to tell what it was, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't alone.
I stood there, completely still, not daring to move, waiting for the sound to stop. But it didn't. It kept going, just as faint, just as chilling, scraping its way toward me,
and I couldn't stop myself from turning around to face whatever was waiting in the dark.
But I wasn't ready for what I saw next. I wasn't sure what it was at first. The air felt thicker somehow, like it wasn't moving, like the space around me had become too still. But I couldn't put my finger on it. I was in someone else's home, in a place that was meant to be comfortable, right? Everyone around me was smiling, laughing. The evening had started off so normal. But there was a heaviness creeping in, pulling at the edges of every conversation, every glance. I glanced around, trying to shake off the growing tension. The room looked exactly like you'd expect from someone with money. Expensive art on the walls, furniture that screamed taste and sophistication. Even the way the lighting was set up, soft, warm, almost inviting. Yet, despite all of that, there was something unsettling. It wasn't visible, but it was there, hanging in the air. Maybe it was the way people were talking. It all felt too forced, too perfect. No one seemed truly engaged in the conversation. They were just going through the motions. I could almost hear the rehearsed nature of their words, like they were reading from a script. I turned to the man sitting across from me, someone I hadn't spoken to yet, and caught his eye. He froze for just a split second. It was subtle, but enough to make my heart skip a beat. His smile faltered, the corners of his mouth tightening, and before I could blink, he quickly turned his head and looked away. I couldn't help but feel like I'd interrupted something, like I wasn't supposed to see that. That look wasn't just awkward, it was a warning. I didn't know from what, but I could feel it deep in my bones. I shook it off as best I could, but it lingered, a cold weight that followed me through the rest of the room. I needed to break the silence in my head, so I moved toward the hallway, hoping a change in scenery would clear my mind. But that's when I saw it. The door. It was at the far end of the hall, just behind a heavy velvet curtain. It blended in with the rest of the space, almost like it was meant to be overlooked. But something about it kept drawing me in. It wasn't like any other door. It was strange, like it didn't belong here at all. And what made it worse, it was locked. I had no idea why it was locked. There was no reason for it to be. But I could feel the pull of that door, like it was calling to me. I didn't know what was behind it, but I knew I had to know. The silence around the door was unnatural. Every time I passed by, I couldn't help but feel like it was waiting for me to touch it, to unlock it, to uncover whatever was hidden. I tried to ignore it. I really did. But the door kept gnawing at the back of my mind. I wasn't the only one who noticed it either. I caught a few fleeting glances from the people around me, and I could tell they were avoiding it. No one said a word, but I knew. They were pretending it wasn't there, just like they were pretending everything else in the house was normal. That's when I saw him, Michael. The host, the one who had invited me here in the first place. He was standing by the window, looking out into the garden. It wasn't the fact that he was looking outside that caught my attention. It was the way he was standing. He was too still. His posture was rigid, his shoulders tight, like he was waiting for something. I watched him for a moment, trying to make sense of it. He wasn't speaking to anyone. He wasn't even looking at anyone. His eyes were distant, cold, staring out into nothing. When he turned around,
His face broke into a smile. One of those fake, too perfect smiles. But his eyes, they didn't match. They were empty. I wasn't the only one who saw it. A few others seemed to notice too, but no one said anything. It was like we were all pretending that nothing was wrong, pretending that this was just another evening among friends. But it wasn't. I could feel it. There was something wrong with him, something wrong with all of it. I tried to push the feeling away, to settle into the evening, but the unease kept growing, each minute slipping further under my skin. I kept glancing around, watching the faces of the other guests, and each time I did, I saw the same thing. Nothing. They were all too calm, too composed. Their movements too practiced, like they were gone through the motions. And it wasn't just Michael. It was everyone. As I stood there, trying to make sense of the feeling crawling up my spine, I felt it again. The pull of the door. I wanted to go to it, to open it, to find out what was behind it. But just as I turned to walk down the hallway, Michael spoke.
I wouldn't go in there if I were you.
His voice was calm, casual, but there was something about it that made my skin crawl. I stopped dead in my tracks, my heart pounding in my chest. He didn't look at me. His gaze was fixed on the wall, but I could feel the weight of his words pressing against me. I felt trapped, like a mouse caught in a snare. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I was too shaken, too aware that there was something much deeper happening here. Something darker than I could see. It wasn't just Michael anymore. It wasn't just the house. It was everything. The guests, the staff, the locked door. I was stuck in the middle of something, and I had no idea how to get out. The world around me had shifted, and I had no idea where it was taking me. But what happened next? That was when everything changed. I had started to question myself. Was I just being paranoid? The unease that had settled over me, the things I couldn't quite put my finger on, they had to be imagined, right? Everyone around me seemed normal, at least on the surface. They smiled, made small talk, offered drinks, but the shadows, they lingered. Longer than they should. And the way people smiled, it wasn't genuine. Their eyes were distant, hollow. That's when I realized I wasn't imagining it. This place was wrong, and I was trapped in it. I felt it more now than ever before. The weight of it. The walls felt too close, the air too thick. I couldn't breathe easily. Every conversation felt like it was happening underwater. Nothing was as it seemed. There was a tension in the house, a suffocating silence beneath all the chatter, as if everyone was hiding something. No one said it, but we all felt it. I could see it in their eyes, faint but there. They were scared, just like me. And that's when it hit me. They weren't pretending. They were trapped, too. But I couldn't leave. I tried. I wanted to. I could feel the pull of the door again. The one I'd noticed earlier. That damn locked door. It was almost like it was calling me, pulling me towards it. I walked down the hallway again, hoping to clear my mind. I glanced around, trying to ignore the mounting dread. The walls were still too smooth, too clean. Everything perfect but lifeless. But something was different this time. I looked up and froze. The door, the one that had been just behind the curtain, was gone. In its place stood an entirely different door. It was darker than the rest, black wood, with a strange, almost unnatural gleam to it. And it shouldn't have been there. It wasn't even possible it should be there. There hadn't been a door there before, and yet there it was, standing solid, imposing, as though it had always been there, as if it had never moved, never shifted.
I stepped closer, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. I had to touch it, had to confirm that it wasn't some kind of trick. My fingers brushed the cold, smooth surface of the door frame, and I felt a shiver travel up my spine. There was something wrong about this door, something that sent a deep, unsettling ripple through me. I don't know why, but I felt like the door was alive.
I took another step forward. The air felt thinner here, colder. Every step felt wrong, and I was acutely aware of how loud my breathing had become, of the sound of my footsteps echoing down the hallway like a drum beat. I glanced over my shoulder. There was no one else in sight, but I could feel it. I could feel that something was waiting, just out of view. The door loomed before me, pressing into my chest with an invisible weight. I reached for the handle. My hand was trembling, my fingers cold. I knew I shouldn't. I knew I needed to walk away, but something in me refused. I had to open it. I had to see what was behind it.
But when my hand touched the handle, I froze. It was warm. Too warm. I pulled my hand back quickly, suddenly horrified by the sensation. Why was it so warm? The door shouldn't have been like that. Shouldn't have felt like it was holding the heat of a room that had been locked up for days. I stepped back, my heart racing now. My chest tightened as I took in a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I knew I was on the verge of something terrible. The silence around me felt suffocating. Every sound felt amplified. My breath, my heartbeat. The shadows in the hallway seemed to stretch further than they had before, creeping up the walls, twisting, changing. The hum I had heard earlier was louder now, almost like a static buzz filling the air.
I turned to leave, but I stopped short. The air had grown heavier. The hallway seemed longer. I couldn't explain it, but the room ahead looked distorted, as if the distance had shifted. The space had stretched. The walls felt like they were closing in on me. I was trapped in a hallway that didn't end, in a house that was shifting and warping, and I was too scared to move forward or turn back. I glanced over my shoulder one last time, my mind screaming at me to run, but I was paralyzed. That's when I saw something else. One of the staff members, the one who had been standing by the door earlier, watching me with a distant look, was now standing at the other end of the hallway, staring at me. His eyes were locked on mine, but there was no recognition in them. Just emptiness. And then he took a step forward. Just one. I couldn't breathe. I wanted to scream, to run, but my legs wouldn't move. He took another step, and then another. With each movement, he seemed to get closer, but not in the way you'd expect. It wasn't like he was walking toward me. It was like he was moving through the hallway, his body seemingly distorting with every step, warping, stretching, like he was no longer human. I didn't know what was happening, but I knew one thing for sure. I was no longer in control. Then just as quickly as he had started moving, he stopped. And for a moment, everything went still. I heard a creak, a soft sound, almost imperceptible, coming from behind the locked door. It wasn't the door itself, not the sound of it opening. It was something else, something inside, something trying to get out. I couldn't stand it anymore. I turned and bolted, not even thinking, just running, trying to get away from whatever was happening, whatever he was. My legs felt like leered, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst, but I couldn't stop. I reached the other side of the house, gasping for breath, my eyes darting around. It was there, that feeling, the one that I couldn't shake. They were watching, but who? And why did I feel like I was being pulled towards something that I wasn't supposed to see? I didn't know, but I had to find out.
And that's when the real shock came.
The air in the room was thick, too thick. I couldn't breathe properly. I thought maybe it was just the tension, the fear that had been building inside me for days now. But this felt different. I could feel it pressing against my chest, suffocating me in a way that was more than just physical. I stood there, my hands trembling at my sides. I had no idea what I was doing anymore. No idea how I had gotten here or why I couldn't just leave. But the house, this place, it had its claws in me now. I didn't know what was real. I didn't know if I was still me.
It was then that I heard it.
A soft sound, like a whisper. At first I thought it was the wind, or maybe someone else in the house, but it wasn't. It was too close, too personal. It came from behind me. Just a faint, almost melodic murmur. The words indistinguishable, like they were being spoken just out of reach of my ears. I turned around. Nothing. No one. Just the stillness. But that whisper, I could still hear it. It wasn't just in my ears anymore. It was inside me. It was me. I stepped back, my heart racing. I was losing it, I thought. I had to be. This was my mind cracking. This couldn't be real. But then I saw it. Him. Michael. Standing at the far end of the hall, his back to me, but his posture, the way he stood there, it was wrong. He wasn't moving. He wasn't breathing. I could see his back stiff and his shoulders rigid, almost unnatural. But it wasn't just that. His reflection was different. I don't know how to explain it, but in the mirror on the far wall, his reflection was still smiling, wide, too wide, while he stood there, expressionless, frozen. The smile in the reflection wasn't his. It wasn't even close to it. I felt a knot twist in my stomach. This wasn't him. Or maybe it was. Maybe this was what he had become, something else, something hollow. But I couldn't move. I couldn't tear my eyes away from it, from that smile, that wrongness in the reflection that was too big, too alive.
Michael, my voice cracked, barely audible, as if even the air around me was refusing to hold sound.
He didn't respond. He couldn't. Because when I looked at him, really looked at him, I saw the truth. He wasn't the one standing there. He couldn't be. I felt the terror crawl up my spine as I realized that this was just a shell, a puppet. And whatever was controlling it was not Michael. A horrible, cold realization settled deep within me. I had been in this house too long. Too long. I turned around, trying to get away from the reflection, from the thought that was suffocating me. But as soon as I did, I saw it. A door that hadn't been there before, standing in the middle of the hallway. Locked. I had been through this hallway 1,000 times, had seen every corner of this house, but there it was now, as if it had always been there. A new door, dark wood, standing in the place where there had only been a blank wall, and there was no way it could have appeared out of nowhere. I backed up instinctively, my hands shaking harder, trying to breathe, trying to think. My thoughts felt like they were crumbling in my head. I was losing my grip. The room, the house, it was changing. The air was colder now. I could feel it seeping into my skin, making the hairs on the back of my neck rise. It wasn't just cold, it was unnatural, like the temperature had dropped, but the rest of the world had stayed warm, and now I was the only one frozen in time.
I heard the whisper again, louder this time, clearer. "You're not supposed to be here."
I whipped around, but no one was there. I wasn't alone, though. I could feel it. Something was here with me, something close, something inside me. I could hear my heartbeat, louder now, almost deafening. It pounded in my chest, in my ears, and my head began to ache. I could feel the pressure of it, the weight of it, bearing down on me like the walls themselves were pushing in. The house wasn't just a building anymore. It was alive. And it wanted me to feel it. It wanted me to understand what it was doing to me.
I took a step toward the door, not thinking, my body moving before my mind had even caught up. But as soon as I reached for the handle, I froze.
It wasn't wood. It wasn't cold. It wasn't solid. It was alive, warm, like it had a pulse, a beating heart. I yanked my hand away, but I could still feel the pressure, like something had clawed at me, leaving a mark where it shouldn't have been. When I looked at my hand, there was nothing. No scratch, no bruise, just a feeling that wouldn't leave, a sensation that refused to fade.
I could hear the whisper again, clearer now, sharper and closer than ever. I didn't know if it was real or if I was losing my mind, but it didn't matter, because at that moment, I knew something was wrong. Something had broken inside this place, inside me, and it was just waiting. Waiting for me to open the door. But I couldn't move.
Not because I didn't want to, but because I was scared to. I couldn't open that door. I couldn't touch it again. Not when I knew what was behind it. But that's when I heard it. The door creaked open, slowly, impossibly. And behind it, I saw him, Michael. But he wasn't Michael anymore. And that was when everything changed. I couldn't move. I wanted to, but my body refused to obey me. My legs were like stone, my chest tightening, my breath coming in shallow, ragged bursts. It felt like the world around me was dissolving, turning to static. My heartbeat was so loud in my ears that I could barely hear the low hum of the house anymore. And all I could focus on was the fact that I couldn't move. I had seen him. Michael. But it wasn't Michael. It couldn't have been. The way he looked at me, or didn't look at me, was more than wrong. And the reflection in the mirror, that smile, I couldn't forget it. I couldn't unsee it. Every detail, every little piece of it was burned into my mind, leaving behind nothing but the unbearable weight of something so deeply unnatural. I was still standing in the same place where I'd seen him, and yet I couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't really gone, that something still stood there in the shadows, waiting. I wanted to scream, to run, but my feet wouldn't move. I couldn't even breathe without feeling like something invisible was pressing down on my chest, suffocating me. A cold sweat was slick on my skin, and yet I was burning up inside. I could feel the heat of panic coursing through me, twisting every thought, every breath into something jagged and painful.
I wanted to turn and run, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from the door. It had opened on its own, without a sound, without warning. The door that had been locked, that had been wrong from the start, was now ajar. It beckoned me. I wanted to shut it out, to turn and leave, to forget everything that had happened, but my body wouldn't obey. I couldn't move. I was rooted to the spot, paralyzed by something deeper than fear.
Something more. Then I heard it. The low, rhythmic thump of footsteps echoing down the hallway. Slow at first, deliberate. Yeah, they were too measured, too precise. I didn't need to turn around to know what it was. I could feel the presence behind me, closer now. The breath on the back of my neck, cold, like someone had just whispered into my ear. Even though no one was there, I didn't dare look back. My mind was spinning. I could hear the footsteps getting closer, each one a pounding beat against my skull. My skin prickled, my pulse racing. I could taste the metal of fear in the back of my throat. I wanted to scream, to call out for help, but I couldn't find my voice. My mouth was dry, my tongue thick and useless.
And then, without warning, the whisper came again. Closer this time, almost tangible, like it was wrapped around my thoughts.
You should never have come here.
It wasn't a voice I recognized. It wasn't anyone I knew, but it was there. It was in me, crawling under my skin, tightening around my throat. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I couldn't do anything but stand there and feel the growing dread gnaw at my insides. It was inside my head now, twisting everything, warping my perception of what was real. Regret flooded me. I wished I had never come. I should have left the moment I felt the weight of the house pressing down on me. I should have known. I should have known that something was off from the start. But now, it was too late. I had walked too far into this nightmare to escape, and the worst part was, I couldn't remember why I'd stayed. I couldn't remember what had kept me here, trapped in this place where reality felt like it was crumbling to pieces. I tried to force myself to move, to flee, but my body refused to listen. My legs shook violently, and my hands were trembling so hard I could barely keep them at my sides. I could hear my pulse in my ears, thudding louder and louder, drowning out everything else. The walls around me seemed to close in, the air growing even thicker, like it was pushing me deeper into some kind of void. I could feel it now, the weight of the house, the weight of the thing that had been waiting for me. The house was alive with it, with them. Something had been watching me all along, waiting for me to see, to understand. And now, it was too late. I tried to move, to tear myself from this place, but it was like the house itself had swallowed me whole. I felt like I was sinking, like the ground beneath me was giving way. That's when the door to the locked room creaked open wider. I couldn't see what was inside, but I didn't need to. The air around me had already changed. I could feel it, a sickening shift, a tugging force pulling me toward it, pulling me into the darkness.
Please? I whispered to myself, but my voice was barely audible. Please, no more. But the door opened farther, and I stepped forward, without thinking, without meaning to. It wasn't me walking. It was something else. It was the house, pulling me. The door was beckoning me, and my feet were carrying me closer, despite every ounce of my being screaming for me to stop. I stepped into the room, and everything stopped. The room was empty. At first, it seemed completely ordinary, just a dark, cold space, nothing special about it. But then the air hit me. It was different here, heavier, I could feel the pressure in my chest growing tighter, like something was waiting, watching, but I couldn't see anything. I was blind in the dark. And then I felt it. Something cold and sharp against my neck. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. My hands were slick with sweat. I didn't want to turn around. I didn't want to face whatever was behind me, but I had to. I had to look. And when I did, when I turned, slowly, ever so slowly, the darkness wasn't empty. It was full of eyes. Cold, hollow eyes that stared back at me from the shadows. Eyes that didn't belong to anyone, but everyone. They were all watching me from every corner of the room, from every inch of the dark. And I could hear it. Them, whispering all at once, their voices merging together. You'll never leave. That was when everything changed. I thought I was free. I really did. But even now, as I sit here, I can feel it. The weight of it. The whispers that never stop. They said it would end once I left, that I'd never have to look back. But I do. Every night. It's there, just beyond the edge of my vision. I can't escape it. Sometimes I hear footsteps in the dark, and other times I feel it breathing down my neck. But what scares me the most, I'm not sure it's ever gonna stop. I don't know if I'll ever be free. And I'm starting to wonder, what if I never was?